Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Mama Noni Davis, and I am the current owner of St. C Academy, which I inherited from my parents, William, the late William Edward Davis, and my mother, Sylvia Davis. Um, we started St. C in 1996, and we have been here for 28 years. Um, the school, St. C, is an African centered school, which um, pretty much means that we teach everything through a diaspora worldview framework of education, all of the courses. And so the last couple of weeks, I've been speaking to you about um, Sunjata and Abubakari II, because I wanted well, my students, first of all, read Sunjata, an old epic of Mali. And they're in this story, they learned about this empire of Mali. Sunjata is a real figure from history. He is the one who was prophesied to be the one who would extend the empire of Mali and make it put it on the map. It would from a very small empire to expanding from Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, all the way I think over to Niger, and it let's see, Gambia, all of those, Burkina Faso, I think a part of Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, part of those areas were also included in the size of this empire. And of course, it was followed by Songhai. But Mali was known for its wealth and the its legacy of building universities and educational systems and its governing structures. This was during the 1300s. Sunjata was established or expanded the empire in 1225, around that same time. And then Mansa Musa came in 1311. Now, Mansa Musa is a relative of Sunjata. He is the grandson. And Abubakari II is who we discussed last week, uh, the person who traveled across the Atlantic Ocean, sending 200 ships the first time, and then the second time sending 2,000 ships in 1311 across the Atlantic Ocean. And there is evidence that he was here. We have Christopher Columbus's journal entries in 1490s, where the indigenous people of the area told him that Africans had been here first. There's also evidence that there was a town named after him, or where he may have settled in Brazil. And of course, we have Dr. Ivan van Sertima in his book, They Came Before Columbus, which I have somewhere in this house because I read it years ago and need to find it. But anyway, so I wanted to continue to expand our conversation to Abubakari. I mean, to Mansa Musa, who is Abubakari's relative. And like I said, they're all related because a lot of times we know that in my 40 almost 40 years of teaching and as a student myself, there is very little narrative about Africans. I mean, I remember my parents were very diligent about teaching me African history. I knew about Singbe. I knew about that there were great Black African people, but we focused on African American history. Um, the we did not know about the African empires. We knew about Spain. We knew about England. We knew about France. We could have all these conversations about Portugal. And because those were the empires that conquered our people. But for us, the narrative was always, this Tarzan nonsense. And unfortunately, a lot of our people believed that or embraced that or thought, hey, this is what Africa is about. So I'm trying to be very diligent about teaching our history. Many of us are descendants of Mali, of Gambia, Senegal, Sierra Leone, all from Mauritania, Mali, Senegal, all the way around the coastline to Angola. And I don't know about Namibia, but I know Angola. So if you can imagine, that's like that that front. I mean, that coastline, um, that's Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, all of these places. More than likely, Nigeria, Cameroon, all of these places. More than likely, most of us, if we take that African ancestry.com, we can trace our ancestry back to Mali or back to Songhai empires, um, and know that we had our own systems of government, and we were the ones that were establishing schools and universities, and that's what we did. And so this education is our legacy. Architecture, that's our legacy. Science, astronomy, all of these things are our legacy. And so I just want to, our these empires predate anything that Europe was doing. I mean, the Western, Portugal, France, Spain, they were having their struggles, but at that time that they were having their struggles, we were making things happen. We had our stuff together, and in fact, Mali is probably the size of Portugal, Spain, France, and Great Britain all together. And so this is what we need to know, and this is what our children need to know. So I want to go ahead and start. So um, Mansa Musa, as I said, became the ruler of the Mali Empire, pretty much by default. Abubakar II decided he wanted to travel across the Atlantic. He was the next in line, but he said, "You know what? I'm going to surrender this leadership and this empire to you, so I can go and make these journeys across the ocean." And of course, Mansa Musa said, "Okay." He varies. Now, there's a lot of debate about how he ascended to the throne, but and somebody said, well, I was reading through the research, I found that some people said he may have actually killed Abubakar, but there's still the evidence that Abubakar actually arrived to the states, or the in Americas, Turtle Island, Americas, has been debunked by, I mean, well, debunks that idea that he killed him. There's also um, a lack of information about him, because according to the oral traditions, the Jolly Musas, who were the keepers of history, were not happy that Abubakari uh, abandoned the throne. And so the record of him in the oral tradition is also scant. But like I said, there's other evidence that he did make this trek. So what makes Mansa Musa significant is, I'm sure most of you, who have any information about him, know that he was considered to be the wealthiest man in the world. And up until, I think, in 2022, it is estimated that he was uh, his wealth in 2022 would have been the equivalent of almost $1 billion. Um, Almost 1 billion, in that range, because that was the extension of his wealth. Now, he he rose to the throne in 1312, which is that 1 year after um Abu Bakari II left. Abu Bakari left in 1311, and Mansa Musa ascended the throne in 1312. And he ruled for 25 years, from 1312 to 1337. Now, the Malian trade was not just about gold. They also did salt, silk, spices, ivory, and they also had slaves. But I want to make a note here. Um, Before we start talking about slavery, we must unravel what does slavery mean in Africa versus what does slavery mean in America. So slavery there were people who maybe had gone into debt, who were prisoners of war, whose uh, uh, areas when the empire was extending. These may have been the people who fought or rebelled against that extension, and so they would be enslaved. Now, they were not chattel slavery. So, chattel slavery is when somebody is considered property, like a dog or a horse or cattle or a car or house, whatever. Chattel slavery was also passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. And we know this through the laws and the legal systems that were created here in the States. If your mama was a slave, then you were a slave. If your grandparent didn't vote in 18 in 1800s, then you couldn't vote. So there were laws that were created that restricted the movement of Africans. And if you and your skin, that was enough. You could be free in New York and they could take you, enslave you, and sell you to someplace else just because you were African or African descendant. And even if you were mulatto or something like that, or considered mixed race, they could still enslave you. So this was not the same. Let's clear that up. So these were probably prisoners of war, like I said, and they were or people who owed debt and had to pay off their service. Another reason why we know that even in Mali that they were not treated with the same disrespect. We know here people were starving, people were not well clothed, people lived in horrible living conditions. Well, according to the research that I have done, um, these people were treated well. Enslaved people in Africa were not chattel. And they did have a humanity was in check. And if you go, they Mansa Musa wrote the Mandan Charter, and in the Mandan Charter, which is 1200s, stated that you could not mistreat people, but if they're in slavery, you could never treat people inhumanely. And so that was not the worldview in Africa. You could not do that. So it we find out that when Mansa Musa is also famous for his Hajj from um, Mali through the Sahara Desert to Mecca. And the journey took almost 2 years across the Sahara Desert. And he started his Hajj in 1324, and it lasted until 1325. Um, there were 6,000 men on this journey with him. 12,000 of them are said to have been enslaved people. All of these people were dressed in, what did they say? Silk and brocade. So they were well dressed. He made sure that everyone was well fed. Each one of the enslaved people carried 4 pounds of gold bars with them and by hand. The people who were his heralds or his entourage, royal entourage, were dressed in silks on horseback and carried gold staffs. There were 80 camels carrying 50 to 300 pounds of gold dust. Um, and they said he made provisions for everyone, animals and people, and they did not want for anything on this journey. Um, Now, this information was recorded by Muslims who were documenting this trek. So they made a note of saying that he was extremely kind and extremely caring for his people. Along the way, he would disperse money. They said he was building schools all along the way. He every Friday during his journey, he would stop and build a mosque. Just feeding the poor the entire journey across the Sahara. This is what he did, and so he paid alms to the poor, built a mosque. Let's see, and upon his arrival in Egypt, they said that he camped in front of the Great Pyramids, which are of Giza, and the name of those pyramids are Khufu, Kafur, and Menkaure. I taught to teach that to the kids in this book, my first trip to Africa by Atlantis Browder. Um, but once he got there, he spent a lots and lots and lots of money, and was very generous with the people in Egypt. And it said that he was well received. I think there was only one incident where he did not want to bow down before the ruler of Egypt, but he finally conceded. And of course, his bow was, he said, was to God, not to this man. But he stayed in Mecca for 3 months, and then journeyed home. Now, unfortunately, there were quite a few disruptions that caused that became problematic when he was ready to depart. Some of his people were became ill, and I guess because if we think about 1300s now, this area has been invaded by Romans, invaded by um, Arabs, and so his people were sick. And I'm not going to say anything else about that, but anyway, there was a lot of disease that spread among his entourage. There were also several skirmishes that he had, or that his people had, with Turks, and some of the people in the people who now control that area, because they had invaded. These were the invaders of that area. But and he had to spend the rest of the money that he had to deal with these issues. And so he essentially ended up broke, um or before he could leave. And so he had to go, and all the money he had given out, he had to ask for some of it back, and also take out loans to return home. But on his way home, he decided to he met people, rather, and he met architects, he met several intellectuals, and writers, and scientists, and asked them to join him on his way back to Mali. And what we now know that he is famous for is establishing the education system, and or re or giving making a more of a thrust of the system, because I believe that I'm trying to think, it's 900 something. It would A woman had already begun to create a learning center in Timbuktu. But Mansa Musa made this project a very important project for him. And I think in the end, I think last week I said that they ended up having 170 schools in Timbuktu, and that and between Timbuktu and Gao. And they also had three major universities. And last week I said that um, in Timbuktu itself, 25,000 of the people were students. 25,000 of the people in the population were students, which really speaks to the level of um, literacy that had to be there. Because if you have 100,000 people and one fourth of your population is highly educated, going to college, and the equivalent of what we would call college, and the equivalent of what we would call a PhD at graduate level PhD programs, then that means that you probably also have a very well educated populace. And I think I also mentioned that it's known that um, um, even from uh, roots, that there were men traveling from the mosque into different villages in Gambia, Senegal, all around those areas, who were also bringing, taking the Quran and teaching people how to read and write outside of Timbuktu. So they had an outreach, educational outreach program in Africa back in the 1200s. So anyway, I thought that was fascinating. So what? But Timbuktu became a major learning center because of Mansa Musa's investment. He brought architects, then they constructed Mali, Timbuktu, Sankore University, and I had some pictures last week of, and of course I don't know where I did with them. I have probably mixed them in with some of my work, but Timbuktu University. Let me see. I may be to pull something up here. Um, that to show that what um he built Timbuktu University. Let's see. Yeah. So this is the university. I don't know if I can get that. So that university was built in the 1200s, and it is still there. And so, like I said, back then it was 2,500 people, and this, I believe, is a picture of the royal palace, and what part of the entryway into the royal palace that Mansa Musa had constructed at that same time frame. So when you see these buildings, these empires, when we see what our people had created, there's no it's not about feeling superior to other people, but we really need to understand who the whole person of who we are, and what and where we really come from. And we may not have all been kings and queens and royalty or part of royal families, but we come from a people who had their own systems of government, their own education systems, their own skills in medicine. And in fact, Timbuktu, I think I said last week that the average household there had 1,000 books in their houses, which is a goal that I have met and planning to continue to. I think I'm almost at 2,000, but books in my home, but of course I also have a school, but still their average household had 1,000 books. That's like wow. And then you also had courses in astronomy. The algebra taught in Timbuktu was the equivalent of what is now taught as algebra at the Sorbonne University in France currently. They have text in astronomy, text in medical procedures, text in different languages. I think I mentioned last week that that you had the Arabic language or alphabet or writing system was used to translate Fula, Hausa, Yoruba, Mandinka. I'm trying to think, several languages. And so they used that script, and so they were writing. And so there's so many things that get debunked by learning this history. We are um we were doing learning medical practices and medicinal herbal practices. There was a branch of how to marriage, what do they call it, marital counseling. They had folks who specialized in this area, how to bring your love your wife, how to make your marriage better, I mean, those kind of everything that we think that we have now that is something that's new and innovative and we're humanistic. We were doing all of this stuff in the 1200s. And there's also documentation. I know I've talked about Umar ibn Said, who was captured in Fayetteville. I mean, no, captured from Senegal and sent to South Carolina. He escaped South Carolina and went to was ended up in Fayetteville. But Ibn Said, uh, uh, Umar ibn Said was reading, and the he I think he became, oh my gosh, I saw the opera. He It was like the 1700s, I believe, and he was caught with books. He was learned, um, and there are several narratives, slave narratives of Africans who were caught en route to university, en route to school. And yet, this narrative of us being unlearned, uneducated, uncivilized, let's see, just people, I mean, no military. I think that at one point they said the military, Mansa Musa had a 100,000 standing army military. So I'm not a big, I don't think that mean, I don't like to judge an empire by its military, but that's quite impressive when you consider the sizes of the militaries of Spain and France and all of these places at that time. But even with that, when we did our our folks did our extensions, and I'm not trying to say we were perfect, because of course we were. Everybody has their problems, but there was always a idea that people had a right to be human. And so, even when they were extending and doing all these things in these other places, there was never this thrust to just go kill everybody just because we can kill everybody. It was when there was a fight, it was usually over a border, it was between empires, and you always have your crazy person, because we had Sasuma Sumoro Kante, who was who is a person that Sunjata had to defeat in order to regain his empire. But that was not the norm. It was not the framework of capturing people and killing people. What happened to our community, the reason why we are over here, is because people were put under the gun and did not understand this military force. And when and initially they said, "Oh, you want some slaves? No problem. We'll send you some people." Because we knew we weren't treating people like they were treating people. And so a lot of the resistance to the slave trade on the continent in Africa was because they're like, wait, why y'all coming back? I just sent you 200 and something people. Why are you back? Because they did not know what was happening to us. They did not know we only had 3 days, 3 years life expectancy in South Carolina or in Barbados. So we need to just know more of these stories so that we can understand where we came from, also understand and grapple with how we ended up here, understand that there was a fight there on the continent, a fight on the ocean. We don't know how many ships didn't make it back. They are not going to tell us that. They're not going to tell you how many people died trying to go up there, go into to Inner Africa to get us. And they're not going to tell you about, all we know about is the revolutions that were here. But more importantly, we need to understand who we are in this world, who we were, and how we can get back to that space and to be the people that we're supposed to be, and to continue upon that legacy. And so next week, I'm going to talk to you some more about some other people. But peace and blessings, and thank you so much for joining me. Ashe.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I know my mother.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course my a St. Cia student.
One day, we won't need this day. We won't need a day to celebrate how far we've come. We won't need a day to prove we're just as fast or strong or skilled. We won't need a day to relive the comebacks, the firsts, or the titles we've won. We won't need a day to rally behind the ones fighting to change the rules. One day, we won't need this day at all, because one day, this day, will be our everyday.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.